So I decided to add coaching. Now, immediately when you go the coaching track, it's the NLP track, it's meta coaching, and you add modalities gradually onto it. But I think my major breakthrough came because coaching can be, with all respect, can be very left brain, very cognitive orientated. And what the constellation work opened up for me as a door, as a huge new experience curve, was exactly that, the experience about what I am talking about. So the embodiment part of coaching got amplified through family constellations and systemic constellations. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that was my...
Absolutely. And I like the word that you said, embodiment, because, and the thing is, when we work with people, and coaching, as you say, is very much narrative, left brain, although I wouldn't say that in all the techniques.
No, in all fairness, no.
But I loved when I set up a systemic piece of work is when I say to the client, what is happening in your body? And it's almost like it rattles the cage a little bit, because what is happening in the body is almost like they're getting a different message and a different insight coming through when they realize that what they have worked out as, for instance, this is going to work, this is my path forward, this is my goal. And then when we set it up in a systemic piece of work in the field, it's almost like this doesn't work. There is almost like something new is coming up. And it's almost like now we can look at the goal in the field instead of having to go through all the disappointments because the goal's not working. So now in the field, we can set up what is it that is not pro your goal? What are the blockages that are coming up that you had not considered when you set a certain goal? And then when they look at those blockages that they hadn't considered, it's almost like, oh, now I have to consider that before I consider my goal. Doesn't mean the goal cannot be achieved, but the hardships of having to go through the blockages in a year or 2 or 3 that can create havoc in one's life, in one's business life, in one's career, now can be looked at and, okay, I hadn't considered that. Maybe I need to first do X, Y, Z. Maybe I need to look at this. Maybe I need to look at that. Maybe I need to deal with the blockages. And dealing with the blockages in the field, for me, is like opens up the space.
Yeah.
In a different way forward.
I think beautifully said. I think a small little step back from that, when the client and the client and the facilitator enter the space of constellation coaching, as you call it, I think the first question is, what is your question? Well, what are you bringing to the session with you? And what's really beautiful, what I learned earlier on in the early training days, was the whole idea that we carry certain burdens, certain questions, certain feelings, emotions, disturbances in our subconscious. But when we externalize them in the form of a representation, whether that's another person's body or a piece of paper on the floor as a placemat or whatever it is, when we do that and we can externalize, there's a certain healthy disassociation from this thing that is always sitting with me. And I have this kind of healthy distance. I can, as you say, I can now look at it. I can place it. I can bring it closer. I can create more distance. And as I do that, I can calibrate what my body is feeling about that distance, about that emotion. And so for me, the integration with the body work is one of the components that flows naturally in constellation work. I also like to call it spatial representation. Not everybody is familiar or comfortable with the word constellation, but because it's just not so used anymore. But spatial representation is there could be a bigger space or a smaller space or a closer space between me and the things that I want to work with. And just that already creates, as I say, that healthy disassociation.
I love what you say, the spatial, I call it mapping. We
Yes.
basically work with a map, whether the map is as in physical representations or whether it is in the field on, we work with papers, or I work remotely with it being on a movable disk. And the thing is, so what I love about it is your internal world is mapped, and you see it, as you said, from an external point of view. So your internal world now is put into an external representation or map. So that external representation allows us to have a much better view on what is actually happening inside of us. And so all these knots that are inside of us become visible. And the decision making now is on a different level. It's not an internal flow. We say the same story over and over. And when we have the same story over and over, we can't, it's our story, it's our internal world. And we go over and over in the internal world. So when we put it outside, then it is, wow, it looks different. We get a different vantage point. And from that vantage point, we get new insights that we then can internalize again, because it's a game between the internal, external world. So it's a beautiful way of just seeing something different and getting new insights.